MarkRogersTV and ProFootballCentral.com on college football, and I continue to hear people try to justify the four-team National College Football Playoff, which goes into effect in 2014, much like the defense for and the justification for the BCS system, which ends this season. Okay, the four-team playoff is only better because it involves two more teams and two more games. Those two teams will have deserving resumes of playing in a national playoff, and therefore it opens up the field for more opportunity for deserving teams. That's the good point, and that's where it ends right there. Simply, it provides more opportunity for worthy teams. It is not a playoff system. A true playoff system involves an objective process involving wins and losses determining who makes the playoffs, not a selection process by biased people with certain perspective and certain skewed perspective, selecting the teams to play for the national championship. In the NFL, Major League Baseball, the NBA, and NHL, wins and losses determine who makes the playoffs. And if there is a tie, then there is criteria based on competition between the teams involved to determine who makes the playoffs. This is truly a selection process, and that's it. I keep hearing people talking about it being a playoff just because it has the name playoff. Yes, it's a selection process which chooses four teams to play in a playoff. It's not a true playoff system. Look at the mess that would have ensued last season in 2012. Take Ohio State's situation, make the Buckeyes eligible, and Ohio State would, of course, have made the 14 playoff, we assume, at 12-0. Notre Dame, likewise, the number one team in the land at 12-0 prior to the postseason. Okay, then we take Alabama. And Alabama, of course, lost one game, but won the best conference in America, the SEC, won the SEC championship game, finished 12-1. We assume that although Alabama's criteria and its resume was similar to other teams around the country, and simply we cannot think about the postseason, hindsight does not play into this. We know what happened. We know that Alabama somewhat proved to be the best team in college football. We cannot take that into account, of course. These decisions would have been made after the conference championship games. But because of what the SEC has done, because of the SEC's reputation, and because based on results on the field, the SEC can lay claim to being the best conference in America, Alabama certainly would have made the four-team playoff. Okay, that last spot, who's it go to? Does it go to Florida? Not the Florida team that lost to Louisville. Of course, we wouldn't have known about that Florida team that lost in the Sugar Bowl. To that point, Florida, despite its woeful offense, was 11-1 and had defeated the most impressive schedule in college football. They defeated Florida State, Texas A&M, LSU, South Carolina. Its one loss to Georgia was very close, in which its defense dominated that game as well. Florida was 11-1, one loss for the Florida Gators in the toughest conference in college football. Okay, Georgia was 12-2. Well, of course, they get eliminated because they've got two losses. But that second loss was to Alabama in the SEC championship game, a game, of course, which we all watched, which Georgia looked very impressive, marching down the field against Alabama's defense and running out of time, finishing at the 4-yard line. Georgia certainly proved to be one of the best teams in the country, we believe. But in this system, two losses. Does that keep them out? But can we count the second loss? Because they only had the opportunity to lose a second game because they won the head-to-head matchup with Florida and won the division championship to go to the SEC title game. Otherwise, Florida might have been in that game and lost the second game. What do you do with Texas A&M? They lost two games. They played in the same conference with Florida and Georgia. They lost two games as well. They also beat Alabama head-to-head. Okay, let's take it outside the SEC, and we've got Kansas State. Now, the eyeball test tells us that Kansas State was not the best or one of the four best teams in the country, we don't think, because of the loss in the Fiesta Bowl to Oregon 35-17. But, of course, we would not have seen that game. Kansas State won the Big 12 championship, defeated Oklahoma and Texas and the other good teams in the Big 12, besides Baylor, head-to-head. Kansas State, with one loss, did the Wildcats deserve to be that fourth team in the playoff system. Or we go out to the Pac-12 and we've got Oregon, who many believe to be the second best team in college football. Oregon only lost one game, so of course they go to the 14 playoff. Or do they? They lost to Stanford. Stanford won the Pac-12 championship game. Thus, they've got the head-to-head matchup and the championship, conference championship, nod over Oregon. So you take Stanford, of course, but Stanford lost 2 games. So you've got Kansas State, Florida, and you also have Oregon with 1 loss. You've got Stanford and Georgia with, in many ways, more impressive credentials with 2 losses. Who do you take? You got Ohio State, Notre Dame, Alabama, Florida, Texas A&M, Georgia, Kansas State, Oregon, and Stanford. All with great resumes, all with 0, 1, or 2 losses, and playing in strength of schedules that vary and conferences that vary in regards to their strength top to bottom. It would have been a mess. All right. Mark Rogers TV, ProFootballCentral.com would love to hear from you on the 4-team college football playoff, which starts next season in 2014, and also the current BCS system. Of course, we've made our proposal for college football to go to a 16-team playoff that is mostly objective in the model of the NCAA basketball tournament, where conference champions are rewarded. Would love to hear from you now, right now, on Mark Rogers TV and ProFootballCentral.com.